So this time around, sitting down with Ben Kraus, the creator of Bridge Road Brewers. Thank you so much for having us here in your brewery today, Ben.
Yeah, no problem. Apologies for any background noises. It's underway. So.
No, that's okay, mate. We can't stop productivity. Let's talk about your journey over the next half hour or so. Let's have a look at Bridge Road Brewers. Give us the backstory of how it came about.
Yeah, the brewery itself. So my background, I'm from Beechworth, so it's probably why the brewery's here. I was born and grew up here, went off to high school in Wangaratta, didn't do very much there, played a bit of footy and messed around. I finished high school, I wanted to get into industrial design and found I didn't make the cut for that. I was a bit lost in what to do and worked for a local vineyard and winery called Sorenberg Winery, which is, if people know Beechworth, it's behind the golf course, behind the football club. For a really great, probably one of the best employees I had in the short career that I was employed before I employed myself. Just a really generous guy. He taught me a lot, and I really got into the viticulture and wine scene, and then enrolled in university and went to Dookie Agricultural College for viticulture and winemaking. Did a 3.5-year applied science degree in horticulture, it was called, which focused on viticulture and some winemaking components. And then a week after I did my final exam, me and a mate were off backpacking in Europe. We'd already planned and saved to do that. Barry from Sorenberg actually has living relatives in the Mosel Valley in Germany, so people might know the Rhine Valley and sort of the home of Riesling. The Mosel Valley is a valley that feeds into the Rhine and is where arguably the best Riesling in the world comes from. It's sort of between there and Alsace in France. So went there with the aim of doing a vintage after backpacking and spending all our money, and did that, and then ended up spending the best part of the next 3.5-4 years travelling and living in Europe and coming home and working initially in wine. I drank a ton of beer at uni and drank a ton of beer when I was backpacking, but then returning home, probably 2 years I was away after the first time I left the country. I did wine vintage twice in France, one in Germany and in Italy as well. But I really got into the beer of Europe and the diversity and the quality, and I came home and thought someone had messed with the beer in Australia, but it was more the fact that the beer had stayed the same. It just wasn't what it was in Europe, and it really got me thinking, why is it so, and why does Europe have that level of beer? I then ended up doing a wine vintage in the Margaret River region at Howe Park Wines. Just down the road from that winery was a small brewery called Bootleg Brewery, so it was in a regional area. The Margaret River region really does cellar door visitation fantastically. It's a big scene in Western Australia. So I took that idea and thought that'd be great back where I'm from in Beechworth. It's a long story. I met my now wife Maria in Austria when I was doing snowboard seasons in Austria. I did 3 of those. I also worked in a brewery in Austria and a beer bar in Austria, and then really decided I wanted to do something for myself. I was 24 and decided I wanted to start a brewery. So rather than drink all my money, the last 6 months I went to Europe, I just worked. I did a wine vintage in Italy, worked a beer bar, volunteered at a brewery, enrolled in an online postgraduate diploma at the university in Ballarat, and taught myself virtually how to brew without actually doing much brewing, and took my money, came home. My parents let me use their garage, 100 square metre garage. They also secured a bank loan with my 15 grand and their house to allow me to buy equipment and start a brewery. So that was 2014, with the brewery opening in 2015, and both myself and Maria were 25 at the time.
Okay. So what's the first thing that you brewed?
The first beer we brewed was called Australian Ale. It morphed into a beer we called Golden Ale, which morphed into a beer that's now Beachy Summer Ale. And it's really shown how the beer market's developed over time. We made the Australian Ale because the Australian market wasn't quite ready for what maybe the US, for those that don't know, really leads the craft beer scene on the planet. They have the most diverse range and probably the highest quality of craft beer going around. Their mainstream beer isn't much to write home about, but their small brewery offering is really significant. And those beers tend to be very hoppy, IPAs, pale ales and things like that. The Australian market hadn't been exposed to much of that, so we started, especially regionally, so we started with an Australian ale, which is probably closer to what people might know Cooper's Red or Cooper's Sparkling rather than Cooper's Green, that style of beer. But we found, although it was initially popular in the broader craft beer market, it's not that exciting, and we found sales for that beer's tapered off, so we've changed it and reinvented it a few times.
So how many beers do you have now?
Oh, too many. We probably do 50 different beers in a year. We have about a dozen in the portfolio year round. Sort of one of the challenges of businesses is now trying to refine that a little bit and have some structure, but we still recognise ourselves and our customers really appreciate the opportunity to try new things, and we don't want to just offer a small window of flavours or experiences. We really want to be at the forefront of doing things that are new and being innovative, and when people visit our venue or look at our range, they can find something that's for them or something they've never had before. So it sort of forces our hand to be a little bit creative.
Yeah. Obviously your product's grown, your business would have grown substantially over the time. How does it feel, because we've watched in more recent years, the craft beer is a thing now. It goes hand in hand with mountain biking, goes hand in hand with wood-fired pizza. Really, when you started, that wasn't so much the case in Australia, was it?
No, definitely not. We didn't invent it. There was certainly pioneers ahead of us. Mountain Goat's probably the most prominent example, but we saw Mountain Goat, for those that don't know, was purchased by Asahi and is now, part of a global company. Little Creatures was probably the other one. A long time ago, they were sort of invested into by Lion Nathan. And there were some smaller Victorian craft breweries, Holgate, still independent, and Grand Ridge, who's still privately owned, that were around before we started, but there weren't so many. So yeah, on one hand it was a challenge because the market was smaller, but on the other hand there wasn't as much competition in the market. So those venues, particularly on a wholesale front, that were willing to take craft beer were easy to sell to. Now they have 100 craft breweries knocking on their door, and it's a harder argument to get a wholesale customer to purchase your product. But the retail market is growing, and the wholesale market is growing. And people will link. I was reading an article that maybe there was something, maybe it was from the Fin Review today about Cooper's Brewery and their profit, and the pen pushers at the Fin Review still refer to craft beer as being drunk by bearded hipsters. It isn't the case. There aren't many bearded hipsters in here today. I've probably got the biggest beard going around. Craft beer is far more mainstream than it was. Sure, bearded hipsters probably drink a higher percentage of craft beer, but dads, uncles, aunties, mums, people are interested in the flavour of their coffee, where their chocolate comes from, how their food is made, and what their beer tastes like. Now, it's not a hipster thing anymore. It's really, but I find it funny that it's still reported that way. Even on a macro sense, that they're saying, oh, it's hipsters. It's like there aren't that many hipsters in Australia to push the market that high.
Yeah. In terms of where you're at now, business-wise, you've mentioned there's been quite a few craft breweries that have ended up selling out to a big multinational.
Yep.
Where are your morals lying with your product and brand?
That's where often people's mind goes to, oh, you're going to get bought out, you're so big. We're still very small in the scheme of beer and beer in Australia. And I also think, even if it was our aim to be acquired, competitively speaking, we're in a regional area, we're a long way from anywhere. Our brand is well known locally, but nationally it isn't as well known as some other brands. And there's over 500 craft breweries in Australia at the moment. I warn people about, I think there's investment in the market at the moment where people think they can start a brewery and get purchased, but maybe 1 in 100 or 1 in 200 actually get purchased. That's a pretty big punt to put your money on. If your end goal is revenue return upon acquisition, you may as well just go put it on the Melbourne Cup and have a punt there, because you've got a higher chance of getting a return, I think. So for us, our model has been always, there's 2 shareholders, myself and my partner. So we've seen a really slow growth as a result, so organic growth. We both wouldn't have earned above minimum wage for the first 5 years, and we would have worked 70 to 80 hours a week, I imagine. There wasn't many, opportunities for holidays. So, but we've taken all that money and we reinvest our profits back into the business and have managed to grow in our own, revenue, and we don't have debt. and we're able to really control our own decision making. So on one hand, that's great to be able to do that. On the other hand, it's led our growth to be really quite slow compared to the scheme of things. There's lots of money flowing into brewing at the moment, and it's very capital intense. So to grow, you need capital, and you can only grow so much capital each year. But I think in terms of our strategy and where we're going, we're on track. We're not looking to be acquired. We're looking to continue to grow the business, control its direction, and do it really sustainably in terms of there isn't anyone who's handed us a couple million who need their return in a few years that's going to force us to change our tack desperately or drop prices to make sure we've got product in the market and those sorts of things. So slow but steady is our plan, I guess.
And it seems to be working so far.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be working, but on the flip side, it's quite hard when, if you look at the Australian market nationally, there'll be startups this year that will overtake us in terms of production and recognition within 12 months because they have capital and because they're quite professional in their marketing, their distribution model, their price points. They might have a model that doesn't need to be revenue positive for a few years, so they're underselling into the market, cheap products, lots of pressure on price because there are business models that aren't thinking about profit now, they're thinking about acquisition or profit later. Whereas we need profit now, so it's sort of an interesting scene in Australia at the moment.
Yeah. Let's talk about family for a little bit. So you mentioned your wife in Austria.
Yep.
How easy was that to convince her to come back to your home? And
I don't know. She'd probably have to answer that herself. Perhaps she was sceptical of the idea and didn't get the concept completely. Very hard. She's from a beautiful place in Austria, the big mountains, and we've got nice mountains here, but they got big mountains. Sound of Music style countryside, and a totally different culture, different language, all those things. But Maria came out to visit. We went to Western Australia together for 6 months, I think, around that time. And then I returned to Austria, and then she returned to Beechworth with me. And then I guess we started the business together. We both had jobs while we were starting the business, just casual jobs. And then Maria worked a lot in the business with me, establishing the kitchen, looking after bookkeeping and accounts. But then kids came along, so took a step back from the business and came back in. And we're just up to our third child now, up to the final child, I should say. And she stepped out of the business for the time being. That 1-year-old, 6-year-old and an 8-year-old taking up a lot of her time and my time as well.
So let's talk about your time and some of your hobbies. You said, acknowledge, to get the business started, 70, 80 hours a week.
Yep.
I'm guessing you don't perhaps necessarily work that hard now?
No, I don't do those hours now. I'm not at work as much as I perhaps used to be, but I still, evenings are spent generally, if I'm not away working or not out doing something, then the computer's open and I'm emailing until bedtime. So it's always the thing that people don't see, I think, in small business is you get home, look after the kids, do whatever needs to be done, kids go to bed, feed yourself, and then 2 or 3 hours of catching up on the day's work that you never seem to get done. So there's always those evening hours, and that I'm quite active in what I'm thinking about. So if I don't do something about it, I can't sleep. So get the work done in the evening as well.
What about unwinding? What are your hobbies? What do you do when you have time for that?
I don't relax much. That doesn't work for me. So I get out and do things. So I used to run a lot, but it doesn't work for me so well. I'm aging, so I ride a lot. So I'm out on the bike quite often. Pretty active in mountain biking and road riding and whatever bike I can get on. My partner is too, so the ship's passing in the night sometimes.
Yeah.
We're swapping between business and child and getting out and being active. So.
Yeah. Now, beer. Let's talk about beer for a little bit. You obviously had a passion there that you've turned into a business. Do you still like beer now, even though it's probably at your disposal at any given time?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I still really like beer and still can be, or am excited about beer. I still like wine as well. I don't work in wine anymore, but I really enjoy wine. Yeah, it's quite a challenge, I think, working a beer and just making sure, keeping a balance of beer. So I would have beer every day. We taste beer at work, knock off and have a beer, either at work or probably when I go home. I think a lot of the staff here will hang around and have a beer and I'm out the door and gone, just because 13 years of being here, it's nice just to cut and run sometimes. I'm still very passionate about beer, and we're still really focused on developing new beers and improving our own beer, so that forces me to keep up with it as well. but also just making sure we keep that healthy balance. Often I'll be away for 4 or 5 days at a time in various cities promoting our brand, and promoting our brand involves drinking beer with people. So you do 4 or 5 nights in a row of being out drinking with customers and showing people beer, and not to over excess, but late nights and always beer involved. It's sometimes nice to come home and just detox for a few days before you start again.
Well, some would imagine that it's the dream job. You know, we all think travel agents must be great. They've got to go and experience the world to then, but I guess it is still hard work, isn't it, consuming beer?
Yeah, there's a difference. Drinking beer with your mates is fantastic. That's great fun. Drinking beer with customers is good fun, but it's still work. So, you know, it's two totally different things.
What's something you can tell me now about yourself that not many people would know?
I don't know. I don't know if I have many secrets. I can't think of any surprising facts or what would not many people know. My life's on social media, so people know where I am and what I do. I just assume they know everything. I don't have any special talents, but I'm involved in a lot of things to do with bikes and beer and kids. And
what's a great saying or perhaps a philosophy that you've heard and maybe you've implemented in your own life or perhaps in business, a motto?
I don't know if there's any words to live by or anything like that. I was thinking the other day about, and perhaps just a trait through both my parents, is I think I was in high school and one of the teachers we had was talking about what I should do in the future, and the teacher said, "Oh, Ben's from a family who just go and do things and get things done. If they want to go do something, they just go and do it." And I thought that was a really strange thing to say. And then thinking about it now, when I was 9, I think my parents sold our family home and bought a bus, and we lived in a bus and travelled Australia for a year. I've probably lived in 18 or 19 different houses, all within Beechworth, and done lots of adventurous things with my family, but that was just because we wanted to do it. We went and did it. So I think getting things done and just having a go is probably a big part of what I do and what makes our business work. Don't see, trying to do something for a big success or be worried about failure. It's just going out and doing things and having a crack, I guess.
And obviously that's what's led you to be where you're sitting here now today.
Yeah.
That ability to just have a go.
Yeah, have a go, and which is becoming harder. I think of the time when I started 15 years ago, in terms of red tape and bureaucracy and barriers to getting things done, and anyone being able to have a go, they were much slower. I think we're finding more and more. I wouldn't like to be a 24-year-old now trying to navigate the bureaucracy of modern day Australia and the way things have changed from being really easygoing to everyone being very conscientious about what could go wrong, and sure, safety has to be at the forefront, but I think we're very focused on that these days compared to 15 years ago, and then go back 15 years before that, where Australia was anyone could do anything. There's no barrier to doing things.
And do you think that's limiting our productivity?
Oh, massively. Yeah. Hands down. I now travel back to Europe every 1 or 2 years, and people would, if you asked an Australian how they would regard a German, for example, and whether they're rigid and bureaucracy would be high, their level of bureaucracy from looking in compared to, so ability to just do some roadworks in Germany. In Germany, they put out some witches' hats and dig a hole, and you have to have common sense not to go near the excavator or the hole. In Australia, we need a 12-foot fence, 10 road workers, and everything else. Like that, we say we're laid back. Those it doesn't exist anymore. We're not laid back. A playground in Austria for my kids when they're there is adventurous. There's lots of risk and lots of danger, but the kids quickly learn if you climb up that and fall, you're going to hurt yourself. And whereas we take that danger away, and I think we're sort of moving towards people should assume there's never going to be any danger, which I think is a risky thing. And it just puts so many hurdles. Again, yes, we have to be safe and we have to make sure we look after all our employees and ourselves. That's for me, that's common sense. But I feel the measures being put around it, can hold things back and really blinker people to the fact that there can be risks, and you need to be actively thinking about what could go wrong and make those decisions for yourself.
It's interesting that you mentioned playgrounds and the risk. Only in the last couple of days, you may have read it. They talk about removing monkey bars from playgrounds.
Oh, that's And like I said, you go to Germany or Austria and their monkey bars, like the beginning, they have amazing stuff and the kids love it. And, you know, they, like I said, they learn and they find out. And the thing I find strange is people probably in these decision-making positions grew up with lots of freedom in Australia to do these fun things, and they're still alive and still doing well. And now they maybe find they need to stop kids from doing what they enjoyed doing somehow. In some
Could
way.
have gone wrong.
Yeah, what could have gone wrong? Imagine if we couldn't do all the things where something could have gone wrong. Like riding a mountain bike, that's more dangerous than a set of monkey bars.
Yeah. What do you consider to be your biggest achievement in life so far?
I guess having a family is a pretty big achievement. Yeah, and being able to, I guess, choose my own direction and make my own decisions and be my own boss and sort of dictate a little bit where life goes and the things that I want to do.
Ever had a moment in time where you've thought, geez, it'd be easier just to work for someone else?
Oh, plenty of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, you know, I've managed to set up the business a lot where I've leveraged myself away from responsibility of all staff. So staff report to different levels of management rather than to me, and I think that's the hardest thing, is trying to be able to manage all the things that you do and all the other problems that people may have. So that's often the hard side is you know, trying to really make sure that everyone's happy and having a good time, and it's an equitable partnership between the business and the employees and you know, that side of things. That's always the more stressful side of business.
Yeah. What's a tough decision that you've had to make?
We're a really tight team, so it's probably only been a couple of times that we've ever really had to let someone go without them making the decision themselves. That's always a hard thing, because I think generally we have a really good culture and there's personal relationships in the business. It's small enough that everyone knows everyone, so having to let anyone go is always tough. Even when it's the right decision to make, it's never an easy decision.
You mentioned the word culture in there. What do you think creates a good culture?
Oh, it depends on what your culture is. We have part of development of the business. We actually have culture documentation for our business. It's up sort of behind the scenes around the place, and we actually have on our packaging, part of our culture is on all our labels and every package of beer that goes out. And we have pillars of, I guess, what's at the core of our business to steer our decision making, but then also internally to make sure we're doing the right thing and that our staff have the right behaviours, and that we have the right behaviours, that staff can point to that and say, well, what you've done here, how does that fit in with what you say the culture is? So it's a really important part of the business. Having people motivated and on board with the culture is ultimately what's going to drive all the efficiencies and, you know, quality and everything along those lines.
And obviously outside of a paycheck, have you got any unique ways you recognise your staff?
Nothing unique, and outside of paycheck and bonuses. So anyone that works here on production, admin side and front of house, so they don't get time. We feed people, we cook their lunch every day. So pizza, pasta, whatever it is, we have a communal lunch. It's a very European thing to do. People are paid while they sit down and eat it. They get a free beer at the end of every shift, so you can knock off and have a free beer or a soft drink. Anyone on site has free reign of the coffee machine. So there are quite a few benefits on that side. There's also, we have staff heavily discounted beer, so people pay not much for beer. There's also anything that's underfilled. We have free beer for people to take home. We regularly have staff events, so we have people to our house and feed them, or we get caterers in and have dinner and have drinks together and cover those sorts of things. So I guess they're the rational benefits of working here.
Yeah, it sounds appealing. Yeah. Have you ever made a bad decision? What do you think is really maybe the worst decision you've ever made?
I don't know. We'll probably always make bad decisions. I'm just blind to the fact that it was a bad decision because I made it. I think they're good. I don't know. I don't think there's anything catastrophic that we've done. There's just decisions. Some are good, some are bad. I don't really look at them. You know, some things pay off. There's plenty of things that we do lots of things, and people see the things that are successful and grow. We've done lots of things that aren't successful and go nowhere and cost money. So, yeah, I don't think I have one bad decision. There's certainly things we could always do better. Hindsight gives you that opportunity, but you don't have hindsight. So
it's always 2020 when you do have hindsight.
Yeah.
Perfect vision.
Yeah.
What do you think the worst thing is that's ever happened to you?
No broken bones.
You seem pretty relaxed.
Yeah. Nothing I can complain about, I don't think. There's always struggles and battles and things, but no, nothing that's...
Any regrets so far in life? Or?
No, I don't know. I don't really think there's time for regrets. Like I said, you could always do things differently and look back and see how you could have done something in another way, and perhaps regret that you didn't do it, but nothing where it's like, oh, I'm stewing over that time. I think if I felt there was something I should have done, I'd try to find a way to do it now, or find an alternative rather than...
You seem to me like a very motivated person. What keeps you motivated?
I don't know. Sometimes I wish I was unmotivated. I guess I like a challenge. Probably too active in thinking of new things and sort of half doing a lot of things. So I'm always motivated to find something else to do and keep things moving forward. I think I'm probably quite competitive too. And in my business, I like to see it. We have high expectations of the products that we make and the venue that we present and anything we do. So I'm constantly looking outwards and seeing if I think we're world class in what we do and how we can be if we're not. So I'm always motivated by that.
Let's say there was a movie made of your life. Who do you think would play you? Or is there a couple of actors that go from the youth through to present day?
Maybe a pretty boring actor. No, I don't know. I don't know what I'd like to think it could be a Coen Brothers film. I'm into that at the moment.
I see a George Clooney in you, Ben.
A bit of George, yeah.
Yeah, George.
Yeah, I get it sometimes.
You've obviously travelled the world. You still call Beechworth home?
Yeah, definitely. I've travelled the world, but only, I can't say that I've been through Asia and Central Asia and everything. So I spent a lot of time in Europe and some time in the States and, enjoying that side of the world. Beechworth, particularly after spending a lot of time in Europe and going to some great places over there, start to appreciate Beechworth. I spent a lot of time in cities. Beer tends to sell in cities, so big cities and small cities. I really enjoy the countryside, and I'm quite impatient, so I cannot stand sitting in traffic. There's no traffic in Beechworth. I think we had the great big bike ride this week, and everyone was dying that they had to spend 10 minutes extra in the car. Lucky they don't live in Melbourne. That it's just a daily occurrence, not because of bikes, because of all the cars on the road. But yeah, I like Beechworth in terms of it's a small town. It's quite familiar, obviously. We have 4 seasons. I like getting outside, so the weather's actually really stable in this area. And everything that's available is 5 minutes away. Not everything in the world is available. Most things you need, and it's 5 minutes, whether it's something for the kids or something for myself or whatever. It's 5 minutes of transit time or wasted time in a car. It's all here and it's all easy.
So if we sat down another 5 years from now, what would we be talking about? Is the business still...
Probably hair loss.
Hair loss?
Yeah. 5 years from now, I imagine the business would be bigger and continue to have expanded. I would think there would be lots of changes in the market. I don't know exactly what they'll be. With hindsight, I will. No doubt we would have changed how this place looks, because we do every year. The offering would be a little bit different. Quality would be better. Yeah, more staff, more beer, more patrons, I guess. Yeah.
And if you could be anywhere else in the world tomorrow with anyone, where would you be?
Well, in 2 weeks I'm in Derby with 6 good mates mountain biking. I wish that was tomorrow. I don't know, that's a hard question. My family might see this. I do like getting outside, and I do enjoy my family, but it's had a day to do something. I'd either be snowboarding off some massive mountain somewhere with some snowboarding mates, or probably doing the same on a mountain bike. And either option would have to have some pretty good beer at the bottom at the end of the day. I think I have a good time with people I'm comfortable around. We certainly wouldn't be talking about beer business or business at the end of the day. We would be talking shit, to put it lightly, and enjoying a laugh after having a an exciting day doing something, I guess.
Good one. Well, Ben Kraus, Bridge Road Brewers, thanks so much for allowing us here into your property and spend a bit of time talking to you and learning a bit more about one of the brains that's developed this great local brand.
Cool. Thanks, Amy.